My name is Emily Wells, and I am 28 years old. In my family, your worth was measured by your degree. Mom was a doctor, Dad, a professor, and my brother, a lawyer. I was the disappointment who dropped out to build a tech company. When I suggested education was not everything at our family dinner, my father exploded. "Get out, you lowlife," he screamed, pointing to the door. Little did they know, I was worth $26 million. The next day, I moved into my Florida beach house. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If you have ever felt underestimated by your family, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I finally proved them wrong. I grew up in a beautiful brownstone in Boston, Massachusetts, where academic achievement was not just encouraged but expected. Our living room walls were lined with diplomas and awards rather than family photos. My father, Richard Wells, was a tenured economics professor at a prestigious university, and my mother, Martha, was a neurologist at Boston Medical Center. Their entire identities were wrapped up in their credentials and professional accomplishments. My older brother, Brandon, was the golden child. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law and secured a position at one of Boston's top firms before he turned 26. At family gatherings, my parents would beam with pride as they introduced him, always emphasizing his academic pedigree and career trajectory. "Our son, the lawyer," they would say, their voices filled with unmistakable pride. Then there was me. From an early age, I marched to the beat of my own drum. While my parents pushed flashcards and educational toys, I was drawn to computers and technology. By age 12, I had taught myself basic coding and was more interested in Steve Jobs than Shakespeare. Our family had a 3-generation tradition of elite education. My grandfather had been a Yale graduate, my grandmother had her doctorate from Columbia, and this academic excellence was expected to continue. During my high school years, dinner conversations often centered around which Ivy League schools I should apply to. "The Wells family has standards," my father would remind me whenever my grades slipped below an A. "Excellence is not optional." When I was 16, I started my first small business, selling custom-designed smartphone cases online. I spent hours perfecting the designs and building a simple e-commerce website. Within 3 months, I was making $500 a week. When I excitedly shared this with my parents, expecting at least some acknowledgement, my father dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "That is a cute hobby, Emily, but it will not put you on any college admission board's radar," he said. "You need to focus on your AP classes." My mother was slightly more diplomatic, but equally dismissive. "Darling, these little projects are fine for now, but real success requires proper credentials." Despite my growing disinterest in traditional academics, I dutifully applied to colleges to please my family. I was accepted to several good schools, and ultimately chose to attend a well-regarded university, known for its computer science program. I told myself I could balance my entrepreneurial interests with getting the degree my parents so desperately wanted me to have. During my sophomore year, I met Gregory Thompson, a visiting lecturer who had founded and sold several tech startups. After class one day, he noticed me working on a personal project and stopped to chat. Unlike my professors who emphasized theory, Gregory asked practical questions about market viability and scalability. He was the first person in an academic setting who seemed to value my business mind over my ability to memorize textbook concepts. "You think differently," he told me. "That is a gift, not a liability." As I progressed through college, the disconnect between what I was learning in classes and what I wanted to create grew wider. I found myself skipping lectures to work on my projects and business ideas. My grades began to suffer, which led to increasingly tense phone calls with my parents. "We are not paying $30,000 a year for you to play entrepreneur," my father said, during one particularly heated conversation. "Your brother never had these problems." The comparison to Brandon was constant. He had followed the prescribed path perfectly, while I was becoming the family disappointment. At holiday gatherings, relatives would ask Brandon detailed questions about his cases while politely asking me if I had chosen a real major yet. I tried explaining to my parents that some of the most successful tech innovators had taken unconventional paths, but this only irritated them more. Those are exceptions, not the rule, my mother would say. And frankly, you are not Mark Zuckerberg. Little did they know that their constant doubt was not discouraging me but fueling a determination to prove them wrong. I continued attending college to keep the peace, but my heart and mind were increasingly focused on the business ideas that kept me up at night, filled with possibility and purpose, in a way my textbooks never could. During the fall semester of my sophomore year, I had a breakthrough idea for a financial management application. The concept came to me after struggling with my own finances and noticing how many of my peers were equally lost when it came to budgeting and investing. Most existing apps were either too complicated or too simplistic. I envisioned something that could grow with users educating them while managing their money more effectively. I began coding the prototype during what should have been study hours for midterms. My tiny dorm room became a makeshift office with sticky notes covering every surface and energy drink cans piling up in the trash. My roommate Katie grew concerned as she watched me coding until 3 or 4 in the morning, only to drag myself to classes where I could barely stay awake. "You are going to burn out," she warned, but I felt more alive than ever. As my passion for the project grew, my grades took a nosedive. The midterm results were a disaster. I received my first C- ever in data structures, and completely failed advanced calculus. When my academic advisor emailed requesting an urgent meeting, I knew I was at a crossroads. Before meeting with my advisor, I scheduled time with Gregory, who had become an unofficial mentor. I showed him my prototype and explained my dilemma. To my surprise, he did not lecture me about prioritizing school. Instead, he asked detailed questions about my business model and target audience. After an hour of discussion, Gregory leaned back in his chair and said something that changed my life. "Emily, I think you have something here. If you are serious about this, I would be willing to provide $50,000 in seed funding." I nearly fell out of my chair. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But you need to understand what this means. Building a startup requires 100% commitment. You cannot do this halfway while appeasing your parents with decent grades." That night I did not sleep at all. By morning, I had made my decision. I would drop out and pursue my business full-time. I knew my parents would be furious, but for the first time in my life, I felt absolute clarity about my path. I waited until the weekend, and then drove home to break the news in person. I had prepared a detailed presentation about my business plan, complete with market research and financial projections. I even had Gregory's seed funding commitment letter as evidence that an experienced investor believed in me. My parents listened silently as I explained everything at the dining room table, the same place where years of academic expectations had been served alongside Sunday dinners. When I finished, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, my father spoke, his voice quiet but trembling with anger. "So, you are throwing away your education, throwing away everything we have worked for." "I am not throwing anything away," I replied. "I am choosing a different path." "A path to nowhere," he suddenly shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Do you think the real world is waiting to hand opportunities to college dropouts? You will amount to nothing without proper credentials." My mother, usually the mediator, was uncharacteristically harsh. "Emily, this is just immaturity talking. You have always wanted instant gratification instead of putting in the hard work." "This is the hardest work I have ever done," I protested. My brother Brandon, who had stopped by for dinner, chimed in with his lawyerly condescension. Be realistic. Real careers require education. This startup fantasy is just that, a fantasy. 90% of them fail within the first year." "Then I will be in the 10% that succeed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My father stood up, his face flushed. "No daughter of mine is going to be a college dropout. If you do this, you are on your own. No more tuition, no more support." I had anticipated this reaction, but hearing it still stung. "I understand. I have already found an apartment." The next morning, I packed my belongings into my used Honda Civic. My mother came to my room, eyes red from crying. "Please reconsider," she begged. "Just finish your degree, then you can do whatever you want." "Mom, I cannot wait. This opportunity is now." As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt equal parts terrified and liberated. I moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment with my best friend Lauren, who was one of the few people who supported my decision. The apartment was in a rundown building on the outskirts of the city, a far cry from my parents' comfortable home. Those first few months were brutal. Gregory's seed funding covered initial development costs and a few months of living expenses, but I had to stretch every dollar. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days to build out my app. Lauren, who was working as a barista while pursuing her acting career, would bring home expired pastries from the coffee shop. There were moments when doubt crept in. Late nights when the code would not cooperate and my bank account dwindled, I wondered if my family had been right. Maybe I was just a foolish dreamer who had thrown away a promising future. Then came our first breakthrough. 4 months after dropping out, we launched a beta version of the app. Within 3 weeks, we had 5,000 users and glowing feedback. A small tech blog featured us, which led to 10,000 more downloads. When Gregory showed the metrics to his network, 2 angel investors expressed interest. That first small success was like oxygen to a flame. It validated my choice in a way that nothing else could have. I was building something real that helped real people. For the first time since leaving school, I allowed myself to believe that I had made the right choice. The next 3 years were a blur of sleepless nights, triumphant breakthroughs, and crushing setbacks. Building a business from scratch was more difficult than any college course I had ever taken. There were no textbooks to guide me, no professors to grade my work. The market was my teacher now, and it was an unforgiving one. I expanded the app beyond basic budgeting to include investment guidance, credit monitoring, and automated savings features. Each new function required weeks of development and testing. I hired 2 other developers, paying them partly in cash and partly in equity since funds were still tight. Despite growing user numbers, revenue was slow to materialize. We operated on a freemium model with basic features available for free and advanced tools requiring a subscription. Converting free users to paying customers proved challenging. There were months when I was not sure if I could make payroll or rent. Lauren remained my rock through it all. She believed in me when nobody else did. On particularly rough days, she would drag me away from my laptop to take a walk around the block or watch a terrible movie, with her insisting that my brain needed occasional breaks to function properly. "The company will not succeed if you have a nervous breakdown," she would remind me whenever I protested taking time off. Even as the business slowly grew, I maintained a frugal lifestyle. While my bank account began to show promising numbers, I continued living in our modest apartment and driving my old Honda. Every available dollar went back into the business. My parents mistook this frugality for struggle, which only reinforced their belief that I had made a catastrophic mistake. During rare family gatherings, they would make pointed comments about job security and retirement benefits, clearly hoping I would admit defeat and return to college. I kept my company's growing success to myself, partly out of pride, and partly because I was not ready to deal with their reaction. The major breakthrough came in our 3rd year. Our data science team, which by then consisted of 3 brilliant engineers, developed an algorithm that could predict market trends with remarkable accuracy. This technology dramatically improved our investment guidance feature, generating significantly better returns for our users. Word spread quickly. Our user base exploded from 50,000 to 500,000 in just 4 months. Revenue followed, finally, putting us firmly in the black. A prominent tech magazine featured us in their Startups to Watch issue, which caught the attention of several venture capital firms. By my 24th birthday, I had raised $12 million in Series A funding at a valuation of $35 million. My personal stake in the company made me a millionaire on paper. The scared college dropout who had once worried about making rent, was now leading a team of 30 employees and managing millions in investor funds. Yet my family remained completely unaware. To them, I was still their misguided daughter chasing an improbable dream. On the rare occasions when I visited home, I downplayed my success, allowing them to maintain their narrative about my poor life choices. Part of me was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth, while another part was simply avoiding the inevitable drama. As our company continued to grow, acquisition offers started to come in, first from smaller fintech companies, then from increasingly larger players in the financial services industry. I declined them all, focused on building something enduring rather than cashing out quickly. My schedule became increasingly demanding. I regularly flew across the country for investor meetings and industry conferences. I met with banking executives and technology leaders who treated me as a peer rather than a dropout. The contrast between how the business world valued me and how my family dismissed me could not have been starker. The pace eventually took its toll. About 4 years after dropping out, I experienced what my doctor later described as an anxiety-induced breakdown. After 3 days of virtually no sleep during a critical product launch, I collapsed in my office. Lauren found me curled up under my desk, hyperventilating, and unable to form coherent sentences. That health scare forced me to reevaluate. I hired an experienced chief operating officer to handle day-to-day operations, and deliberately stepped back from micromanaging every aspect of the company. For the first time, I took a 2-week vacation, spending it at a quiet beach house in Florida. The peace and beauty of the oceanfront property stirred something in me, a longing for a more balanced life. Shortly after my 27th birthday, a major financial services corporation approached us with an acquisition offer that was too significant to dismiss outright. $26 million with the condition that I stay on for a 2-year transition period. After extensive discussions with my executive team and board, I made the difficult decision to sell. The day the acquisition papers were signed was surreal. I sat in a sleek conference room, surrounded by lawyers and executives, signing documents that would transfer my creation to new owners, while simultaneously transferring an almost unfathomable sum to my bank account. I felt both a profound sense of loss and an equally profound sense of accomplishment. With the first portion of the acquisition money, I made a decision. I purchased a $7 million beachfront villa in Florida, similar to the one where I had found such peace during my vacation. It would be my sanctuary, my reward for years of sacrifice and hard work, yet I told no one in my family about this purchase or the acquisition. Some stubborn part of me wanted them to recognize my success on their own without me having to announce it. After finalizing the sale of my company, I found myself at a crossroads. For years, my identity had been completely wrapped up in being a founder and CEO. Now, with financial security and no immediate professional obligations beyond the transition period, I had time to reflect on other aspects of my life, including my strained family relationships. When my mother called to invite me to a family dinner celebrating Brandon's promotion to partner at his law firm, I surprised myself by accepting. Perhaps it was time to mend fences. Or maybe I was finally secure enough in my own success to face their disapproval without it affecting me. The dinner was scheduled for a Saturday evening at my parents' home. I deliberated extensively about what to wear, eventually selecting a simple but elegant black dress that projected understated confidence. I did not want to broadcast my wealth through designer labels, but neither did I want to appear as though I was struggling. As I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, I took a deep breath to steady my nerves. Through the window, I could see my family already gathered in the dining room. The scene looked like something from a magazine picture, perfect and proper, just as my parents had always preferred things. My mother answered the door with a slightly stiff hug. "Emily, you made it. Come in. Everyone is waiting." The dining room table was set with the good china, a clear indication of the importance of the occasion. My father gave me a curt nod from the head of the table. Brandon was there with his wife Stephanie, both dressed impeccably, in what I assumed were very expensive clothes, meant to signal their professional success. The guest of honor arrives, Brandon said, with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. We were just discussing my new corner office. Congratulations on making partner, I said sincerely. Despite our differences, I was genuinely happy for my brother's achievement. Thank you, he replied, seeming momentarily caught off guard by my enthusiasm. I was not sure you would understand what a big deal it is in the legal world. And just like that, the condescension I had grown so accustomed to over the years was back. Dinner began with my father pouring expensive wine and offering a toast to Brandon's success. To continuing the Wells family tradition of excellence, he said, pointedly avoiding eye contact with me. My mother asked polite questions about my life, but I could tell she was not really listening to my answers, her attention continuously drifting back to Brandon and Stephanie. I kept my responses vague anyway, not yet ready to reveal the extent of my success. And how is your little app project going? My father finally asked during the main course, his tone making it clear he considered it a hobby rather than a legitimate career. It has been going well, I said carefully. We have had significant user growth this year. User growth does not pay the bills, though does it? Brandon interjected. What is your monetization strategy? I began explaining our premium subscription model and the enterprise solutions we had developed for financial institutions, but I could see his eyes glazing over. Technology simply was not interesting to him unless it directly related to legal practice. Emily was always creative, my mother said, as if creativity was a consolation prize for not having a real career. Remember those little phone cases she used to make? Stephanie, who had been relatively quiet, decided to join in. I love your dress, Emily. Target has really stepped up their game, have not they? The implied insult was clear, but I simply smiled. Thank you. How is the real estate market these days? I heard your brokerage has been struggling with the downtown properties. I knew from social media that Stephanie's real estate business had recently lost a major listing. Her smile faltered slightly before she recovered. Just a temporary adjustment. Unlike some industries, real estate requires proper licensing and credentials, so clients know they are working with qualified professionals. The conversation continued in this vein throughout dinner, with subtle and not so subtle digs at my life choices. I maintained my composure, reminding myself that their opinions no longer had the power to hurt me. Still, it was exhausting to sit through course after course of thinly veiled disapproval. As dessert was served, my father turned the conversation to what he clearly considered my ongoing failure. Emily, your mother and I have been talking. It is not too late for you to return to school. With your grades before you left, you could probably transfer most of your credits. I appreciate the concern, Dad, but I am actually quite satisfied with my career path. What career path? He scoffed. Running an app that will probably be obsolete next year is not a career. It is a temporary distraction. Richard, my mother cautioned. We agreed to be supportive. Supportive of what, Martha? Our daughter throwing away her potential. The tech industry is fickle. One day you are up, the next you are unemployable, with no credentials to fall back on. I took a sip of water, choosing my words carefully. Success comes in many forms. A degree is one path, but not the only valid one. Brandon leaned forward. Be realistic. Dad is right. What is your long-term plan? You are what? 28 now. You should be establishing yourself in a stable career. I could talk to HR at my firm. They sometimes have paralegal positions open that do not require advanced degrees. The condescension in his offer made something snap inside me. 4 years of dismissal, of being the family disappointment, of hiding my accomplishments to avoid their judgment, all came rushing to the surface. I appreciate the offer, Brandon, but I am doing fine. More than fine, actually. Define fine, my father challenged. Because from where I sit, fine would mean having completed your education and secured a position with growth potential and benefits. Not everyone defines success the way you do, Dad. Some people create their own paths. And where has this path led you? A rental apartment and a job with no security or respect. Actually, I just sold my company for $26 million. The silence that followed was deafening. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me in disbelief. My mother was the first to recover. That is not funny, Emily. It is not a joke. I closed the deal last month. The company that acquired us is keeping me on during the transition, but essentially, I am financially independent now. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. If this is some kind of elaborate lie to justify your choices, why would I lie about something so easily verifiable? Look up the acquisition. It was in the Wall Street Journal. Brandon pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. After a moment, his eyes widened. She is telling the truth. There was an acquisition. He looked up at me with new eyes. You are the founder they mention in the article. My father shook his head, refusing to accept this new reality. So, you got lucky. One successful app does not validate dropping out of college. It was not luck, Dad. It was 4 years of 80-hour weeks of learning and failing and adapting. It was hard work, just not the kind you recognize or value. And now, what you think money makes you successful. There is more to life than just making a quick fortune. I agree completely. Which is why I have also established a foundation to help young entrepreneurs who cannot afford traditional education paths. Because sometimes the most innovative thinking comes from outside the system. That was when my father exploded. He stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible messaging that undermines higher education. You got lucky once, and now you think you know better than generations of academic tradition. Dad, I am not saying education is not valuable. I am saying it is not the only path. Get out, you lowlife! He screamed, pointing toward the door. If you came here to flaunt your money and corrupt your brother's celebration with your anti-intellectual garbage, you can leave right now. The room fell silent again. My mother looked mortified, Brandon uncomfortable, and Stephanie was clearly recalculating her entire assessment of me in real time. Without another word, I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and walked out. As I got into my car, I felt a strange mixture of pain and liberation. The final illusion had been shattered. No amount of success would ever be enough for my father, if it did not come with the credentials he valued. That night, in my hotel room, I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding and start living authentically. The next morning, I would fly to Florida and begin the next chapter of my life. I spent a restless night in the hotel, processing the explosive end to what was supposed to be a reconciliation dinner. By morning, I felt surprisingly calm. The confrontation had been painful, but clarifying. For years, I had been living in a strange limbo, successful in my professional life, but still seeking validation from a family that could not see beyond their own narrow definition of achievement. Over room service breakfast, I called my realtor Natalie to confirm that my Florida property was ready for occupancy. Everything is set, she assured me. The furniture was delivered yesterday, and the security system is active. When can we expect you? Today, I replied, making the decision in that moment. I am booking a flight right now. After hanging up, I called Lauren, who answered despite the early hour. How did it go? She asked immediately, knowing where I had been the night before. I gave her the abbreviated version of the disaster dinner ending, with my impromptu decision to move to Florida immediately, rather than in a few weeks as originally planned. Are you running away, or moving toward something? She asked, with the directness that had made her such a valuable friend over the years. Both. Maybe I just know I need a clean break. A fresh start where I am not constantly looking over my shoulder for family approval. That is never going to come. Then do it, she said. But promise we will still talk every day. Of course. And you will be my first house guest. After booking a flight, I called my assistant Patricia to arrange for the rest of my belongings to be packed and shipped from my apartment. Then, I checked out of the hotel and headed to the airport. For the first time ever, I booked a first-class ticket. It was a small act of self-acknowledgement, a way of saying that I deserved the success I had achieved. As I settled into the spacious seat with a pre-flight glass of champagne, I felt a weight lifting. The 22-year-old college dropout, who had left home with nothing but a dream and determination, was now flying first class to her multi-million-dollar beachfront property. 3 hours later, the plane touched down in Florida. The warm air hit me as I exited the airport, a welcome contrast to Boston's early spring chill. A private car service I had arranged was waiting to take me to my new home. As we drove through palm tree-lined streets, I found myself growing increasingly excited. This was not just a new home, but a symbolic fresh start. We turned onto a private road that wound along the coastline, finally stopping before a gated entrance. The driver entered a code, and the ornate iron gates swung open to reveal a curved driveway leading to my villa. Nothing could have prepared me for the emotional impact of seeing my new home in person for the first time. I had purchased it based on virtual tours and photographs, but they had not captured its true magnificence. The $7 million property featured a modernist main house with walls of glass facing the ocean, a separate guest house, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the horizon and private beach access. Natalie was waiting in the circular driveway. "Welcome home, Emily," she said with a broad smile. "Ready for the grand tour." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, a kitchen that would make a professional chef envious, and a primary suite with panoramic ocean views. Every room had been furnished according to the design plan I had approved, creating a space that was both luxurious and comfortable. "The office is set up as you requested," Natalie said, leading me to a room with built-in bookshelves and a massive desk positioned to face the ocean. Full fiber internet is connected, and the tech team installed the multiple monitors and docking station yesterday. I ran my hand along the desk, imagining the new projects I would develop in this inspiring space. "It is perfect." After Natalie left, I wandered through the house in a state of disbelief. This was mine. All mine. Not a family home where I was the disappointing daughter. Not a shared apartment where I scraped by on ramen, but a beautiful space that I had earned through my own efforts. I changed into a sundress and sandals, then took a glass of wine out to the terrace overlooking the beach. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt completely at peace. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of waves. After years of setting an alarm for 5 a.m., waking naturally felt like the ultimate luxury. I made coffee in my enormous kitchen and took it out to the terrace where I spent an hour simply watching the ocean and allowing my mind to wander without purpose or pressure. Over the next few days, I began to explore my new community. I discovered a local coffee shop where the baristas quickly learned my name and order. I found hiking trails along the coast and a farmer's market with the freshest produce I had ever tasted. It was a different world from the high-pressure environment I had inhabited for so long. On my third day in Florida, I met my neighbor Eleanor, a retired publishing executive who had moved to the beach after selling her company. She invited me for sunset drinks on her terrace, which became a regular occurrence. Eleanor was in her 60s, but had the energy and outlook of someone decades younger. She became not just a neighbor but a mentor of sorts, someone who understood the particular challenges of being a woman who had found success on her own terms. "The hardest part is not building the business," she told me during one of our sunset sessions. "It is figuring out who you are when you are not working 18-hour days." Those words resonated deeply. For years, my identity had been completely wrapped up in my company. Now I had the freedom to redefine myself, to discover interests and passions beyond work. I set up my home office, but found myself using it sparingly. Instead, I began swimming daily in the ocean, trying my hand at painting and reading books that had nothing to do with business or technology. I took long walks on the beach and photographed spectacular sunrises. For the first time since childhood, I allowed myself to play without purpose. A week after my arrival, Lauren flew down for the weekend. She stepped out of the car and stared at the house in amazement. "Holy moly, Em. You said it was nice, but this is next level." I gave her the grand tour ending at the guest house where she would be staying. Too much, I asked suddenly, self-conscious about the luxury surrounding us. Not at all, she said firmly. You earned every square inch of this place. I am just so proud of you. We spent the weekend exploring the area, floating in the infinity pool, and staying up late talking on the beach. Lauren had been with me through the leanest times, bringing home day-old pastries and believing in me when no one else did. Having her blessing for this new chapter meant everything. After she left, I began thinking about my next professional steps. The acquisition agreement required my involvement for 2 years, but in a limited capacity that could be handled remotely. I had time and resources to consider what I truly wanted to do next. One morning while swimming in the ocean, an idea began to form. What if I created a foundation, specifically aimed at supporting young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, not just with funding, but with mentorship, networking opportunities, and practical business education? I could use my experience and connections to help others bypass the traditional gatekeepers that had tried to block my path. By the time I returned to shore, I was energized by the concept. I spent the rest of the day researching similar organizations and identifying gaps my foundation could fill. For the first time since selling my company, I felt that familiar spark of purpose and excitement. That evening, I finally did something I had been avoiding. I updated my social media profiles with information about the acquisition and posted a photo of myself on my terrace with the ocean in the background. No boasting, just a simple acknowledgement of this new chapter in my life. Within minutes, congratulatory messages began pouring in from former colleagues and friends from college. Among them was a message that caught me by surprise. Michael, my ex-boyfriend, who had sided with my parents when I dropped out, sent a private note. Emily, I just saw the news about your company. I was wrong about you, and I am sorry. Congratulations on proving all of us wrong. As I sat on my terrace watching another spectacular sunset, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the scared college dropout to successful founder, to this moment of hard-won peace. I had spent years hiding my success from my family, hoping they would somehow recognize my worth without me having to announce it. Now I understood that their validation had never been necessary. My worth was not defined by their recognition, but by my own accomplishments and choices. The gulf between my current reality and my family's perception of me remained vast. But for the first time, I felt no urgency to bridge it. I was living my truth at last. 3 weeks after settling into my Florida villa, I had established a comfortable routine. Mornings began with ocean swims, followed by a few hours of work on my foundation plans or acquisition transition tasks. Afternoons were for exploration or creative pursuits, and evenings often included sunset drinks with Eleanor or video calls with Lauren. I had almost managed to put the disastrous family dinner behind me when my carefully constructed new life collided with my past. A tech industry publication had run a feature on my company acquisition, including details about the $26 million sale and a brief profile of me as the founder. The article went viral in tech circles, then spread to mainstream business news. Suddenly, my success was public knowledge. My phone rang while I was painting on the terrace. Seeing my mother's name on the screen made my stomach tighten. With a deep breath, I answered. "Hello, Mom." Emily. Her voice sounded strange, almost shaky. "I just saw an article about you online. Is it true? Did you really sell your company for that much money?" "Yes, it is true." There was a long pause. "Why did not you tell us? Before the dinner, I mean." Would it have made a difference? Would Dad have suddenly respected my choices if he knew I was rich? "That is not fair. We have always wanted what is best for you." "No, you wanted what you thought was best, which is not the same thing." Another pause. "Where are you living now?" "Your old landlord said. You moved out." "I bought a place in Florida. On the beach." "Florida?" She sounded genuinely shocked. "When did this happen?" "Right after the dinner. I had already purchased the property, but I decided to move in immediately, rather than waiting." I see. Her tone had shifted to something I could not quite identify. Your father and I have been talking. We feel terrible about how things ended at dinner. Perhaps we could visit. Try to clear the air. The request caught me off guard. My parents had never visited me before, not even when I lived just across town. Now, they wanted to fly to Florida. Let me think about it, I replied cautiously. After hanging up, I called Lauren for advice. They want to visit. What do I do? Do you want to see them? I do not know. Part of me wants to show them everything I have accomplished. Another part wants to protect this new peace I have found. Maybe this is an opportunity for real closure, Lauren suggested. Either way, you are in a position of strength now. You are not that scared kid moving out of their house anymore. After careful consideration, I called my mother back and invited them to visit the following weekend. I also extended the invitation to Brandon and Stephanie, figuring if we were going to have a family reckoning, everyone should be present. In preparation for their arrival, I asked Lauren to fly down for moral support. Eleanor also promised to be on standby for emergency debriefing sessions. I cleaned an already immaculate house, arranged for a private chef to handle meals, and tried to mentally prepare for whatever might transpire. When the day arrived, I watched through my security cameras as the taxi carrying my family pulled up to the gate. The driver entered the code I had provided, and the gates swung open. I stepped onto the front portico to greet them, Lauren, standing supportively at my side. The expressions on their faces as they exited the car and took in the property were almost comical. My mother's mouth literally fell open. My father stood frozen, suitcase in hand. Brandon and Stephanie exchanged wide-eyed glances. Welcome to my home, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is yours, my father asked, his tone incredulous. The entire property? Yes. Would you like a tour? I led them through the main house, showing them the gourmet kitchen, the formal dining room, with seating for 12, the living room with its wall of windows, facing the ocean, and the media room with its state-of-the-art equipment. With each new space, their shock seemed to deepen. How many bedrooms? My mother asked faintly. 5 in the main house, plus a separate guest house, where Brandon and Stephanie will be staying. And you live here alone? My father asked. For now, though Lauren visits often. When we reached my office, my father paused to examine the multiple monitors and high-tech setup. This is where you work remotely for the company that acquired you. Yes, though, I am also using it to establish my foundation. Foundation. For young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing funding and mentorship outside traditional educational pathways. His expression tightened slightly, but he said nothing. The tour ended on the terrace, overlooking the infinity pool and ocean beyond. A staff member appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. Perhaps a toast is in order, I suggested, to family reunions. We clinked glasses awkwardly. No one seemed to know quite what to say. Finally, my mother broke the silence. Emily, this is all so unexpected. You never gave us any indication that you were this successful. Would you have believed me if I had told you? Of course we would have, my father said, but his tone lacked conviction. Really? Because at dinner 3 weeks ago, when I did tell you, your immediate response was to accuse me of lying and then kick me out of the house. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I may have overreacted. May have. Richard, my mother interjected. We agreed to be honest. Emily, your father and I have done a lot of soul-searching since that night. The article about your company forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we have treated you. Like the fact that I have been a massive success by any objective measure, yet you still considered me a failure because I did not do it your way. Brandon, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. For what it is worth, I was impressed even before seeing all this. The acquisition numbers alone are remarkable for someone your age. Thank you, but this is not about the money. This is about respect, about acknowledging that there are many valid paths to a meaningful life, not just the one you all prescribed. My father set down his champagne glass with a definitive click. You want respect? Fine. I respect what you have accomplished. You took a risk that I would never have had the courage to take, and it paid off spectacularly. But that does not mean I was wrong about the value of education. I never said education has no value. I said it is not the only path worth taking. Easy to say when you are the exception that proves the rule. For every college dropout who becomes a millionaire, thousands end up struggling. Which is exactly why I am starting my foundation, to help more people beat those odds. We went back and forth like this through drinks, and into dinner prepared by the private chef I had hired for the weekend. The conversation was tense, but surprisingly productive. For the first time, my parents seemed to actually listen to my perspective rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. Stephanie, ever the pragmatist, asked detailed questions about the acquisition process and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Brandon, after a glass or two of wine, admitted that he sometimes envied my freedom to create my own path, rather than following the prescribed route he had taken. After dinner, Lauren tactfully suggested we all take a walk on the beach to digest. As we strolled along the shoreline in the moonlight, my mother fell into step beside me, letting the others walk ahead. I need to apologize, she said quietly. Not just for the dinner, but for years of making you feel less than, because you chose a different path. Thank you. That means a lot. I was so focused on what I thought success should look like that I completely missed the amazing person you were becoming. She hesitated. Your father is having a harder time adjusting his perspective, but he will get there. He is proud of you, even if he does not know how to show it yet. When we returned to the house, the conversation continued late into the night. There were moments of tension and old patterns threatening to re-emerge, but also genuine breakthrough moments. By the time everyone retired to their rooms, something had shifted. Not a complete reconciliation, but the beginning of one. As Lauren and I debriefed in the kitchen over late-night ice cream, she smiled. That went better than expected. Surprisingly, yes, though I am exhausted from the emotional marathon. Progress is progress, she said, squeezing my arm, and you stood your ground beautifully. The next morning, I found my father sitting alone on the terrace, with coffee, gazing out at the ocean. I joined him, and we sat in silence for several minutes. You have done well for yourself, he finally said, better than I would have predicted. Is that an apology, or just an observation? He sighed. Both, perhaps. I am not good at admitting when I am wrong. I noticed. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You get that stubbornness from me, you know. Along with my entrepreneurial drive. Grandpa always said, you could have been a great businessman if you had not been so set on academia. He looked surprised. He told you that? Many times. He saw the same qualities in both of us. My father seemed to consider this new perspective. I may have been protecting you from what I perceived as a risky path. I took the safe route, the academic route, because it offered security. I wanted the same for you. I understand that, but I needed to find my own way. He nodded slowly. And you have. Quite impressively. It was not the effusive apology I might have once craved, but from my father it was significant. A bridge, however, tentative, was being built between us. The family stayed for breakfast, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. This is not the end of our conversation, she said. It is a new beginning. As the taxi pulled away, I stood with Lauren on the front steps, feeling emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. The family that had dismissed me for years had finally seen me, really seen me for the first time. 6 months after my family's visit to Florida, I found myself in a very different relationship with them. The reconciliation was not instant or perfect, but it was genuine. We had established new patterns of communication based on mutual respect, rather than judgment and defensiveness. My father and I had fallen into a routine of weekly phone calls where we discussed everything from business strategy to philosophy. He had begun reading books about entrepreneurship and technology, making a real effort to understand my world. During one memorable call, he admitted that teaching the same material year after year had left him intellectually stagnant, and my unconventional success had forced him to expand his thinking. "In some ways, you have become my teacher," he said, the humility in his voice, something I had never heard before. My mother had transformed from my harshest critic to one of my biggest supporters. She regularly sent articles about women in technology and business, often with notes saying, "Reminded me of you." When a major business magazine included me in their 40 under 40 list, she framed the article and proudly displayed it alongside Brandon's law school diploma. Even my relationship with Brandon had evolved. The condescension had given way to a more equal sibling dynamic. He had begun referring clients to my foundation, and occasionally asked for my perspective on the technology investments his law firm was considering. Stephanie had also softened, especially after I helped her incorporate virtual reality tours into her real estate business, significantly boosting her sales. The foundation I had established was thriving beyond my expectations. We had already funded 15 young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds, providing not just capital, but mentorship and networking opportunities. I had structured the foundation to prioritize innovators who had faced barriers to traditional education, whether economic, social, or personal. I had been clear with my family from the beginning that supporting my foundation meant accepting its core mission, which implicitly challenged their views on traditional education. To my surprise, they had not only accepted this, but had become increasingly supportive of the alternative paths to success that the foundation championed. "Education comes in many forms," my father had said, during a foundation event he attended with my mother. "I am learning that later than I should have, but I am learning." The boundaries I had established were equally important to our healing process. I was clear about what I would and would not accept in terms of commentary on my choices. When old patterns occasionally emerged, I calmly but firmly redirected the conversation. Over time, these interventions became less necessary as my family adjusted to our new dynamic. My personal life had also blossomed in unexpected ways. Through a foundation event, I had met Daniel, an architectural engineer who specialized in sustainable building design. Unlike previous relationships, where I had downplayed my success to avoid intimidating potential partners with Daniel, I was completely authentic from the start. He was secure enough in himself to celebrate my achievements rather than feel threatened by them. Our relationship developed naturally and without pressure. Daniel had his own successful career and understood the demands of entrepreneurship. We supported each other's ambitions while building a connection based on shared values and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. Lauren remained my closest friend and had recently moved to Florida herself, taking a teaching position at a performing arts school 30 minutes from my home. We still had our weekly movie nights, though. Now they took place in my home theater rather than our cramped apartment. Eleanor continued to be a valued mentor and friend. When I confided in her about my family's transformation, she shared her own experience with family reconciliation. "It takes time for people to adjust their entire worldview," she said. "The fact that they are trying speaks volumes about how much they love you." As my first year in Florida drew to a close, I hosted a holiday gathering that would have been unimaginable 12 months earlier. My parents, Brandon and Stephanie, Lauren, Eleanor, Daniel, and several entrepreneurs from my foundation all gathered at my villa for a weekend celebration. Watching my father deep in conversation with a 20-year-old foundation recipient who had developed an innovative educational app, I felt a profound sense of how far we had all come. The young man had no formal education beyond high school, but had taught himself coding through online resources. A year ago, my father would have dismissed his accomplishments as invalid without the proper credentials. Now he was listening intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering genuine encouragement. Later that evening, as everyone enjoyed dessert on the terrace, my mother raised her glass. "I would like to propose a toast she said. To Emily, who had the courage to follow her own path, and the generosity to bring us all along with her, even when we resisted. The genuine warmth in her eyes brought tears to mine. And to family, I added. The ones we are born into, and the ones we create for ourselves. As conversations flowed around me, I took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. From the college dropout my family had once dismissed to the successful entrepreneur and philanthropist sitting at the head of this table, surrounded by love and respect. The path had not been easy, but it had been authentically mine. The most profound lesson I had learned was not about business strategy or financial success, but about the courage to define my own worth rather than accepting others' definitions. True wealth was not the number in my bank account or the size of my home, but the freedom to live according to my own values and the ability to create positive change in others' lives. I had also learned the complex nature of forgiveness. And for it, forgiving my family did not mean forgetting the pain they had caused, but rather choosing to move forward without being anchored to that pain. It meant acknowledging their capacity for growth and change, just as I hoped they would acknowledge mine. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, my father pulled me aside. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that I am prouder of you than I have ever been of anyone, including myself. Not because of what you have achieved, though that is remarkable, but because of who you have become, despite my best efforts to make you someone else." That acknowledgement, more than any business success or material possession, felt like the true culmination of my journey. Now I ask you, have you ever had to forge your own path against the expectations of others? How did you stay true to yourself when everyone was telling you that you were wrong? Share your experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, the most valuable degree you can earn is in knowing and trusting yourself. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to follow your own unique path wherever it may lead.